Nobody tells you about the questions. They tell you about the grief, yes. They warn you about the empty house, the food bowl you can't bring yourself to move, the way certain times of day hit harder than others, the morning routine that now has a shape with something missing from it. People prepare you, in their own imperfect ways, for the sadness. But nobody really talks about the questions that come after. The ones that show up at 2 in the morning when the house is quiet and your mind won't stop. Where did they go? Is there something on the other side? Are they okay? Not in the way people say it to comfort you, but actually, genuinely okay. Are they somewhere? Are they anything still? Those questions are what brought you here today, and I think they deserve more than a quick answer. Most of us grew up hearing about the Rainbow Bridge at some point. If you haven't, here's the version most people know. There's a place just before heaven, a meadow where animals go when they die. They're healthy there, young again, free from pain, and they wait. They wait for the person they loved most. And when that person finally arrives, they run to them and they cross the bridge together. It's a beautiful image, and for a lot of people, it's genuinely comforting. But I want to do something a little different today. I want to go deeper than the image, because I think the people who are really sitting with this question, the people who lost someone in their pet, not just an animal, they deserve more than a pretty picture. They deserve the full conversation. So let's actually talk about it. Where did the Rainbow Bridge come from? What do different traditions believe? And more than any of that, what does it mean for you right now in the middle of this? The Rainbow Bridge poem, as most people know it, actually has surprisingly murky origins. For years it was passed around in grief communities without a clear author, a piece of writing that spread because it reached people, not because anyone was promoting it. Several people have claimed to have written it over the decades, and the truth of its origin is still debated. What's not debated is what it did. It gave people a framework, a place to put their hope, a way to imagine their pet not as gone but as somewhere. That matters more than people give it credit for. Humans are meaning-making creatures. We don't experience loss in a vacuum. We need a narrative around it, a context, a somewhere for the love to point. The Rainbow Bridge, whatever its origins, gave that to millions of people. And there's nothing naive about that. There's something deeply human about it. But the concept of animals existing beyond death isn't new, and it didn't start with a poem. Across cultures, across thousands of years of human history, animals have held a place in our understanding of what comes after. In ancient Egypt, animals weren't just companions, they were sacred. Cats were associated with the goddess Bastet. Dogs were connected to Anubis, the god who guided souls through the afterlife. Animals weren't separate from the spiritual world, they were part of its architecture. The idea that they simply ceased wasn't part of the framework. Indigenous traditions across North America speak of animals as guides in the spirit world. In many of these belief systems, the connection between a human and an animal doesn't end at death. It continues, shifts form, travels with you. Your animal doesn't wait for you somewhere else. They're part of the journey itself. In Norse mythology, animals accompanied warriors into the afterlife. In Celtic traditions, certain animals were seen as messengers between worlds. The boundary between living and dead was thinner than we think, and animals moved across it more freely than people did. This isn't coincidence. Cultures that never spoke to each other, separated by oceans and centuries, arrived at something similar, that the bond between humans and animals is significant enough to survive death. That's not a small thing. That's thousands of years of human intuition pointing in the same direction. Now, science, because I think this conversation deserves that too. There's no scientific consensus on what happens after death. That's the honest answer. Consciousness, what it is, where it goes, whether it persists, these are genuinely open questions that the most brilliant minds in physics and neuroscience are still wrestling with. Anyone who tells you they know for certain what happens, on either side of the argument, is offering you belief, not fact. But here's what science does tell us, and I think it's worth sitting with. Energy doesn't disappear. It transforms. That's not a metaphor, and that's thermodynamics. The energy that made your pet alive, that powered every tail wag and every purr and every time they pressed their head against your hand, that energy didn't vanish. It changed form. Where it went, what it became, Whether any part of what made them persists in some way, that's where science stops and something else begins. Some physicists, particularly those working in quantum theory, have explored the idea that consciousness may be more fundamental than we think, not a byproduct of the brain, but something the brain receives, like a radio receiving a signal. If the signal is the thing, not the radio, then what happens when the radio stops working is a very different question than we've been asking. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm telling you the conversation is bigger and more open than it might seem. What I keep coming back to personally is this: the bond between a person and their pet is one of the most uncomplicated forms of love that exists. Think about what it actually was. It wasn't negotiated. It wasn't conditional. It didn't depend on you being your best self. It existed on your worst days just as fully as on your best ones. They saw you in the morning before you were ready to be seen. They sat with you through the things you couldn't explain to anyone else. They asked for so little and gave so completely. That kind of love has weight, it has substance. It shaped you, shaped the way you moved through a house, shaped your daily rhythms, shaped the sound of your own voice because you talked to them so much. They're woven into you in ways you're probably still discovering. Does something with that much reality just stop? I don't know, nobody does. But I find it very hard to believe that something that real leaves no trace, that it goes nowhere, that the specific, irreplaceable presence that was your pet simply ceases in any meaningful sense. And then there are the stories, not statistics, stories. The woman who felt her dog jump onto the bed 3 nights after he died, the mattress dipping exactly the way it always did, exactly on his side. The man who smelled his cat in the hallway 6 weeks later, so clearly that he walked toward it before he remembered. The families who watched their remaining pets stare at an empty corner, ears forward, tails moving slowly, visiting with something that wasn't visible. These aren't the stories of unstable people. They're the stories of ordinary, grounded human beings trying to make sense of something that doesn't fit into ordinary explanation. And they're so consistent, across countries, across languages, across people who'd never heard each other's stories, that dismissing them entirely starts to feel like its own kind of irrationality. Maybe the Rainbow Bridge isn't a literal place with meadows and golden light. Maybe it's not a place at all. Maybe it's more like a state, a continuation of something that was always more than just biology. Maybe the love that built that bridge already exists on both sides of it. If you're in the early days of losing your pet, I want to speak directly to you for a second. You don't have to have answers right now. You don't have to decide what you believe about what comes after. You're allowed to hold the question loosely, to let it sit with you without forcing a resolution. Grief isn't a problem to be solved. It's a process to be moved through. And part of that process is sitting with the not knowing and not letting it destroy you. What I can tell you, what I believe with everything I have, is that what you gave them was real. What they gave you was real, and real things don't just disappear, they go somewhere, they become something. And whether that something includes a meadow or a beam of light, or just the way you'll love your next pet differently because of who they were, they're not finished. Not really. Neither is your love for them. Tell me in the comments, what do you believe happens? I genuinely want to know. This community holds people from every background, every belief, every kind of loss, and every perspective belongs here. What brings you comfort when you sit with this question? If this video gave you something today, a little more peace, a little more space to breathe inside this grief, share it. There's someone in your life right now carrying this quietly, and they might need to hear exactly this. Like this video if it reached you. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. We don't do surface level here. And I'll see you in the next one.